أشرقت نفسي بنور من فؤادي حينما رددت يا رب العباد.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. So inshallah we're going to start a new hadith number 7, and I still have at the back of my mind that we have hadith number 40 which we still haven't finished, but inshallah one day I will just do that last part. There was some points from the last hadith that I wanted to mention, but I can't remember what those points were now, so inshallah I'll try and write them down for next time. But today we'll have a fresh start inshallah with hadith number 7. This is a very, very important hadith, and I will talk about its importance once I have finished reading the hadith to you. عن أبي رقية تميم بن أوس الداري رضي الله عنه أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال الدين النصيحة قلنا لمن قال لله ولكتابه ولرسوله ولأئمة المسلمين وعامتهم. On the authority of Abu Ruqayya bin Aus Tamim on the authority of Abu Ruqayya Tamim ibn Aus Ad-Dari, the Prophet ﷺ said, the religion is nasiha. The people said, to whom? The Prophet ﷺ replied, to Allah and to his book and to his messenger and to the leaders of the Muslims and to the common folk of the Muslims. And this hadith is recorded by Muslim. And deliberately the word nasiha has been left as nasiha, and it hasn't been changed into anything in English in the translation of the hadith, and we'll discuss that later why that is the case. So as we normally start, what do we always start with when we start a hadith? The narrator. We start with talking about the narrator, and it's a good way to cover some of the companions that maybe you've never even heard of. So for example, has anybody heard of Tamim bin Aus Ad-Dari? Can you tell me where you have heard of him? You heard of him, but you don't know where. Okay. This name actually, it rings a very, very strong.
Named her son Tamim, and she told us the story.
She did, I remember.
Who named her son?
Tamim.
Shayma. Okay.
She told us the story.
Okay.
Hadith where they go to this island.
Yes, that's right. Yes, and that's why this name.
No, he goes to the
No.
island, he comes back and
It's
goes
the entire lengthy hadith about the Dajjal.
I remember the name attaching it.
he's in a cave. And
Yes.
he's don't get over it.
Anyway, that's not what he was known for, but I'm just saying that when I read this name, that's the first thing that came to my mind was that long hadith of about Dajjal, and I mean that's a very scary narration, but it's worth reading and looking at for yourselves. Okay. Which is my phone? This one. Let's hope the recording continues. Okay. So, who was Tamim Ad-Dari, or Tamim, Abu Ruqayya Tamim bin Aus Ad-Dari? So he was originally a Christian, and he became a Muslim in the 9th year after Hijrah. And he became Muslim towards the end of the life of the Prophet ﷺ, after the Battle of Tabuk. His kunya was Abu Ruqayya because he only had one daughter whose name was Ruqayya, so that was his kunya. And as for his name Ad-Dari, there's different explanations people have given. Some said that perhaps his grandfather's name was Dar, and so that's why he's known as Ad-Dari, or perhaps it's in reference to a place that he was from, and that's why he's called Ad-Dari. Allahu alam, but this was his full name. One of the things that stands out about him and that is well known amongst the companions was his love for Salah and his love for the Quran. And something absolutely outstanding about him is that it is said that he was known to recite the entire Quran in one rak'ah of his tahajjud prayer. And sometimes, you read these things about some of the Sahaba and you think that maybe they're a bit exaggerated. So maybe he read a few ajza, or maybe he read like half the Quran, but people are saying, And one of the brothers, he looked at, I think, about 50 biographies about Tamim ad-Dari, and they all mention that he would recite the entire Quran in one rak'ah. So this was something that he was actually known to do. And he had an extreme closeness and an extreme attachment to the Quran and to his salah. And his salah was very, very important to him. Masruq said that once a person came to him from Mecca and he pointed to an area and said, "This is the place where Tamim would stand and recite Quran the entire night in his salah." One time he was standing and he was reciting the Quran and he was reciting Surah Al-Jathiyah, and when he came to verse number 20, he read it over and over again and he cried until the entire night had passed by. And that verse is, I hope if I open the Quran, this is not going to stop. Yeah, it hasn't stopped. Okay, but it hasn't stopped, alhamdulillah. Okay. Yes, I found it, yeah. So, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. إنهم لن يغنوا عنك من الله شيئا وإن الظالمين بعضهم أولياء بعض والله ولي المتقين هذا بصائر للناس وهدى ورحمة لقوم يوقنون. Second.
What number hadith is that again?
It's ayah number
7.
20 from Jannah.
No, hadith number 7.
What?
20 from Jannah,
I think it's actually ayah number 19. Just read the translation to you. Indeed, they will never avail you against Allah at all, and indeed the wrongdoers are allies of one another, but Allah is the protector of the righteous. The reason he stopped at this and he kept repeating it and kept crying is because he was concerned whether he was amongst the people who do evil and will never find their place with the pious in the akhirah. So he was just concerned about his akhirah, and so that's why this ayah was concerning him and it was making him cry. He was very particular about his salah, and Anas radiallahu anhu said that he purchased a gown that was he just said it was for 1,000. We don't know if it was for 1,000 dirham or 1,000 dinar, but apparently it was a very expensive and costly garment that he purchased, and he would only wear that gown when he would do his salah. So that's showing that the salah was very special to him, but he also paid special attention to how he stood in front of Allah. And there are a few other Sahaba as well who are known to have put aside a garment which was just for salah. So they would keep it clean, they would keep it perfumed, and every time they would do salah they would wear it. And if you think about it, it's when you are doing salah, what exactly are you doing?
You stand in the
Yes, you're standing in front of Allah and you're speaking to Allah. So imagine if you were going to speak to someone very special, someone, a dignitary or a celebrity or somebody like that. You wouldn't just get up and go in your pajamas, right? You would take care, you would shower, you would clean yourself, you would comb your hair, you'd smell nice, you'd look nice, you'd take care of all these things. But when we stand in front of Allah, most of the time we don't even give it a thought, It's whatever we are, smelling, not clean, haven't showered, dirty, filthy, just stand and just... So we don't give it that importance. But these people, for them, salah was a real connection. It was a real conversation with Allah. For us, I think it's just more virtual, and we're just a bit disconnected. So sometimes these things just become mundane, and we just do them all the time, and we just stop paying attention to them, because it's just sort of like, it's just one of those things, pick up a glass and drink water, that kind of thing. But this is something that each salah, you should give it attention, you should give it its right, you should give it its time, and the thing that salah deserves, you should give it that, so that it's a salah that is actually written for you, and it's not just something that where you've just ticked the box and you've like I said to you last time in the dars, that there are two ways of approaching salah. One is that you're doing your salah because you don't want to be punished by Allah, so you want to just fulfill the obligation. And two is because you love to speak to Allah, you love to stand in front of Allah, and you just can't wait for salah time to come so you can stand in front of Allah and speak to Him. So these are two completely different approaches to salah. So both the people are doing salah, but what is inside their heart and their intention and their attitude towards the salah, it makes a world of a difference in what they will get at the end of that salah. And so that's why, for example, you might go to the masjid, for example, in Ramadan or during any normal salah time, and you will see all the sufuf of people standing and praying, right? Do you think everybody is getting exactly the same ajr and exactly the same thing is being recorded? No, each one of them is getting a different evaluation of that salah, each one of them. And that evaluation depends on their approach, their attitude, and their feelings. And this is not something that can be taught in a dars. That is not something that you can learn from a book. It is something that comes from inside. It is your feelings, your connection with Allah that causes you to feel that feeling in your salah. So that is something that, if you don't feel it, then that means you need to work on your relationship with Allah and feel that, that longing, that excitement when you are going to do salah. Most of us, we put it off because it's just burdensome, and we know, okay, it's time for salah, okay, I'll do it in a little while, let me just do this. There are other things we find more exciting, like checking our WhatsApp or sending a message to someone or eating something, and we keep putting off the salah because that's the not interesting part of our day. Whereas really the most important thing you do throughout your day is each of your salawat. Every salah you do, remember that this is the most important thing you are doing in your day at the moment, is your salah. It's more important than anything else that you're doing. I hope all the phones are still recording, inshallah. Okay. So, all right. He was one night. He was very. He loved his salah, but he was also very, very meticulous with his tahajjud salah, which is a voluntary prayer. One night he missed his tahajjud salah, and he became extremely upset with himself, and he became extremely regretful that he had missed that one tahajjud. And so he stood an entire year and didn't sleep as a punishment for himself for the one night that he missed his tahajjud. So he paid a lot of attention. This was something very, very important to him. And I know, when I heard this and read this, I said to myself, maybe there's been a mistake. Let me just go back and, make sure that I have this information correct. And it is correct. That is what he did.
How did he miss it?
And probably overslept, or maybe he was tired and he didn't get up.
He stayed up for a year.
Yeah, he stood for a year. during the night. Yeah. No, as in, yes, I think that's what it meant, that he didn't sleep for a year. Yeah. Maybe he made up for it during the day, but during the night he stayed awake the whole night, as just like sort of to recompense the fact that he had missed that one. Yes. The regret and the nadama he felt was so intense that he couldn't get himself to sleep for a whole year. And again, these are things to think about. These were human beings. They had flesh and blood. They had fatigue. They had needs, just like all of us. They felt hungry. They felt tired. They felt sleepy. They were not made of any different material than us. But what is the difference? What do you think is causing them to behave this way? And yes, it's their iman. Their iman was like mountains, and our iman is just so weak today that just standing for one salah, it becomes too tiring for us. But for them, they could do these things, and they had the stamina to carry on. And again, like he missed a voluntary prayer, and he was so regretful. How many of us, we miss our obligatory prayer, and we just flick it like a fly and think, okay, inshallah, I'll try again next time. Maybe I'll do it on time. It's not even a big deal. I don't know what he would have done if he had missed one of his faraid. This was just a voluntary prayer. A person came to Tamim and he said to him, "How much Quran do you read?" And he became angry and he said, "You seem like one of those people who randomly wake up one night and read some Quran and tell the people what they did." So what he's saying is that he was very regular with this. This was like his habit to recite Quran, to do salah. It was not like a one-off. So he's saying to this man that you seem to be one of those people who once in a while will wake up and they'll recite Quran at the Tahajjud time, and then they'll feel really happy with themselves, and then they'll tell everybody, guess what, yesterday I woke up at 3 o'clock in the morning, I read Quran, I did salah. So he's just saying that I would rather do a little ibadah but do it consistently than to just do it occasionally. And he is saying this when we know that he was the one who was reciting the entire Quran in a rak'ah. I'm not saying he was doing that every night, but he has done that, and he's still not answering a question like that when okay. Now, another interesting thing about him is that he was the first person to bring a lantern into the masjid of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And that's an interesting thing, because at that time there was no concept of light or any kind of lighting in Medina. So once it became sunset, things were more or less dark. Even inside the masjid of the Prophet ﷺ, people would have to really go close up to someone to know who they're speaking to, who they're next to, because after Maghrib, between Maghrib and Isha, whatever was their habit, they would do that, pray Isha, and most people would sleep after Isha. And if you go to any rural areas, even today, once it's nightfall, it's their habit to sleep, because there's nothing else to do in pitch dark. There is no artificial lighting. This artificial lighting has actually, it's upset the natural order of things, where now people are staying awake until like late into the night, and some people's day actually starts after 9 p.m. Where it's like they come out of their cave and they say, okay, what's there to do now? And then they'll stay awake all night and they'll sleep in the morning. So it's actually upset people's schedule. But when there is no light, then naturally once it's dark, your body clock also sort of like synchronizes with that darkness, and it just starts shutting down, and you feel sleepy and you go to sleep, and then you start your day fresh and early. Anyway, so because he has a Christian background, he used to travel a lot to Syria and back. And during one of his journeys, he went to Syria and he saw them using this lantern. And it was a very new thing, it was a strange thing for him. He was fascinated by it. So he took one and he brought one back, and he brought it back to Medina. And there are two different narrations about what he did with them. One is that he asked one of the people in the masjid to hold it and stand with it, because this was a new thing. They didn't know what to do with it. How you supposed to keep it? Where you supposed to hang it? And there's another narration which says that he hung it or he kept it somewhere, and then it lit up the masjid. And when the Prophet ﷺ entered the masjid, this light, it like struck him in his face, and he said, "What is this? And who has brought this?" So they said to him, they said that Tamim has brought this. And the Prophet ﷺ called him, and he said to him, he said, "You have illuminated Islam," because this is something that is actually now, it can benefit them to have a bit of light in the masjid. I mean, the thing is, nowadays when we go to Medina and Mecca, I know in the beginning, I used to think, this is what the Sahaba must have felt. This is how the Sahaba must have behaved. But no, the Sahaba were not living in a 5-star hotel and having bed and breakfast. And, they were not in air-conditioned homes. They were actually on gravel, with very little to wear, very little to eat, sucking on date stones. When it's dark, it's absolutely pitch dark. There's no light, there's no bulbs, there's no phones, there's nothing. So it's very difficult to really understand and comprehend what their existence was like. But the Prophet ﷺ was very pleased with him. And so he called him and he said to him, he said, "You have illuminated Islam. May Allah enlighten your dunya and your akhirah." He also said to him, he said, "You have done something praiseworthy. You have done something really noble." And he said, "If I had a daughter, I would have married her to you." I mean, this is a really exciting thing for them to have a light in the masjid. And so another Sahabi who was there, his name is Nawfal bin Muttalib, bin Harf bin Muttalib. He said, "I have a daughter." And so the Prophet ﷺ said to him, he said, "No one is better than him for you to marry her to, And before the evening ended, Tamim was married to this Sahabi's daughter, and her name was Mughira an-Nawfal. And so this is how his marriage took place when he brought in the lantern. Amongst there are many stories narrated about Tamim ad-Dari, and amongst them, one of the ones that al-Dhahabi has mentioned in his Siyar is a story by someone called Muawiyah bin Harmal. Now remember that, when you have such a close connection and such a close attachment with the Quran, and you have such a close attachment to your salah, you basically have a very strong relationship with Allah, because these are the two main ways of connecting with Allah. Like they say that if you want to speak to Allah, you pray, and if you want Allah to speak to you, you recite Quran. These are the two main connections with Allah that you have in this dunya. You have salah and you have Quran. So you can imagine someone who recites so much Quran, someone who is so particular about their salah. I mean, can you imagine what kind of individual this must be? How much nur must be on his face, what his heart must be like, what kind of individual this is. This must be an amazing person. But I know he looks like an ordinary person, but this is someone who is very special. So Muawiyah bin Harmal said, he was visiting Medina, and he stayed in the masjid for a while. Now in those days, there were no hotels, there were no motels, there were no inns. That's why the guest had so many rights, because when you would visit a city, you would expect to be hosted. There is no furnished apartments, there's none of that. It's only people's homes, and that's it. So if anybody comes from outside the city into the city, then you are expecting that somebody has to volunteer and host him. A lot of the times these would be people who don't know anybody in the city, so they would probably go to whoever is the leader and present themselves, and then they would be hosted by someone. So Muawiyah was in Medina, he was visiting, and he was just, he stayed in the masjid for a long time. And then he said that, after a while, he said, I started to feel very hungry, and I hadn't eaten for a very, very long time. And he said, I was so hungry, I felt that if I don't eat, something might happen to me. He was really hungry. So he said, I went to the Khalifa, and he went to Umar radiallahu anhu. And he asked Umar radiallahu anhu to arrange some food for him. So Umar radiallahu anhu said to him, he said, I will send you to the house of the person who is the best of the people of Medina. So Muawiyah said, I was wondering to whose house he would send me. And he sent me to the house of Tamim ad-Dari. And he said, I got to witness firsthand what I had been hearing about his salah, about his Quran, about his recitation. And so he said that I got to see all that firsthand, what everybody had been talking about. Then he said one day a huge fire came out. And that's why, sidetracking slightly with rights of a visitor. When you read about the rights of a visitor and to give him the best thing, and the rights of the visitor are for 3 days, etc., etc. This applies to a house guest, as in somebody who's staying overnight in your house. It does not necessarily apply to somebody who's just visiting you for a little while. And the reason it was limited to 3 days is because, like I said, people would come from far. Like, they would have traveled for a month. They've come into the city. Again, like I said, there's no hotel, so somebody has to host him. So the host can look after him for up to 3 days, and then you should really be looking after yourself thereafter, because you might be staying for a while until you have to head back. And again, like I said, journey times were very long. So just to clarify that the rights of the visitor are based on, house guests. So Muawiyah said that one day, he said there was a huge fire that came out from Al-Harra. Now this is the famous fire that happened in Syria, which is from, anybody know? What is the special thing about this fire, and why should we know about it? Yes, it's one of Alamat as-Sa'a. It's from one of the signs of the Day of Judgment. Yes, at the time of Syria. Harra. And this fire was vicious, it was spreading, it was massive, and it was moving really fast. So the people were very scared. And they came to Umar radiallahu anhu and they told him, they said, something needs to be done about this. This thing is spreading fast and it's going to start coming towards their homes. So Umar radiallahu anhu, he came to Tamim radiallahu anhu and he said to him, go to that fire and handle it. So Tamim said, he said, man ana wa ma ana. He said, who am I and what am I? There's this massive fire and you're telling me that go and handle it. He said, how am I going to do that? So Umar radiallahu anhu, he kept saying, go and handle the fire, go and handle the fire, go and sort it out. He said it so many times until Tamim eventually got up and he went to deal with the fire. And he was forced to go. And so Umar radiallahu anhu and Tamim ad-Dari, they both headed in the direction of the fire. So Muawiyah said, I thought to myself, let me follow them and see what happens. So he went along with them, and he said Tamim was making a pushing gesture with his hands towards the fire, and he was reciting something. And as he was reciting it, he was pushing with his hands, and he said that the fire started to retreat. And he said he kept doing it until the fire retreated into a valley. And he said Tamim went into that valley along with, where he had pushed the fire. And he said he kept pushing back the fire. And Umar radiallahu anhu said, what I am seeing right now, those after me will not see this. Basically what he's trying to say is that seeing something is not like hearing about it. So like we are hearing about it and we're thinking that, what must that have been like? but he saw it with his eyes. And like I said to you, that somebody who is so close to Allah, somebody who has such a strong relationship with Allah, their dua and their communication with Allah is just so much more special than someone who is far away from Allah. So, sometimes we make dua, we ask Allah for different things, and we think, nothing's happening with my dua. These are, it might be that Allah is delaying it for a reason, but these are also times for us to stop and check our relationship, our connection with Allah. Is it strong? Is it weak? And these kind of stories, these are from the miracles of the Sahaba, because some of the Sahaba had miracles. And miracles, they are something which are even part of our aqidah, because sometimes, people try and come up with scientific explanations for these things, but there aren't scientific explanations. Miracles are something that we believe happen, and they happen by the Prophet ﷺ, and there were some miracles of the Sahaba.
One question: how is it an halama for
That's narrated from the Hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. So he's mentioned some of the things which are signs which will happen, and they indicate that the Day of Judgment is coming very close. So it's through the Hadith that we know that this is one of the signs. Okay. Tamim was also the first one to hold spiritual gatherings of advice. So for example, like a halaqah that we're holding. So he was the first one to come up with this idea, and he went to the Prophet ﷺ. He went to Umar radiallahu anhu. You will see that a lot of his stories, they are from the Khilafas, because like I said, he became Muslim towards the end of the Prophet ﷺ's life. So he went to Umar radiallahu anhu, and he advised him, and he suggested to him, he said that, let's do these halaqat where we can advise people, where we can, talk to people and give them a reminder. But Umar radiallahu anhu, he was not comfortable with this idea, and he had a valid reason for not being comfortable, because he didn't trust the qussas, the storytellers, where people will sit and they will tell stories. Because what happens when you're telling a story? Like for example, yes, or it gets added, yes. So for example, when you go back and let's say Alia rings Diba, and Diba says, oh, so what happened at the dars? So she's going to tell her what happened at the dars, but there might be things she's going to add, she's going to leave out. She's a human being, right? She's not going to give her an exact, accurate depiction of what happened tonight. So Umar radiallahu anhu, he was worried, that things are going to get mixed up, added, taken away, and he was not comfortable with that idea, and facts are going to start getting mixed up. But Tamim kept insisting until Umar radiallahu anhu agreed. And so Umar asked Tamim ad-Dari radiallahu anhuma, he said, what advice will you give the people? So Tamim ad-Dari said, I will recite to them the verses of the Quran. So for him, that's like the best advice you can give, is what Allah has, told us. And he said, so he said three things. He said, I will recite to them the verses of the Quran. He said, and I will encourage them to do good and prevent them from doing evil. So Umar said, this is good and profitable. This is a very good idea, and this is something that will bring us success. So after that, Umar radiallahu anhu told him, your first you could say project to advise the people will be before the Jummah khutbah, before I come out. So obviously the Amir would come and do the khutbah. He said, before I come and start the Jummah khutbah, you will come and you can, give the people some advice, and then I'll come and do the khutbah. And so Tamim ad-Dari would do that. He would come and he would speak to the people, he would give them advice, encourage them to do good, prevent them from doing evil, and then Umar radiallahu anhu would come and do the khutbah. This carried on until the time of Uthman radiallahu anhu. And when Uthman became a Khalifa, he increased that, and he said that your lectures have been very beneficial for the people, and people have benefited from them. They have, it's been very useful for them. So he said that, let's increase it. And so he said that, you do the Jummah thing and you do another thing during the week. And so it increased to 2 lectures during the week. And this continued until Uthman was killed. Once Uthman was killed, Tamim ad-Dari, he moved to Sham, he moved to Syria, and he remained there until he passed away in the year 40 AH. And he was not only known as a scholar in Islam, but also in Christianity. He was known as a rabbi or one of the very well-versed priests. So he had this enthusiasm and keenness for knowledge. So even in Christianity, he paid attention to his religion, and he was a great priest of his time. And then when he became a Muslim, he was a great Sahabi of his time. And many Sahaba, they narrate a hadith from him, such as Ibn Umar, Ibn Abbas, Abu Huraira, Anas radiallahu anhu. And there are 18 ahadith that he has narrated, which is a small number. And none of them are in Bukhari, and there's only this one in Sahih Muslim, the one that we are doing now. And the thing with Imam Bukhari is that he was very meticulous with the isnad, with the sanad, with the chain. And so that's why he has not recorded any of Tamim's hadith in his book. But what he did was, because Tamim's hadith were, they were good, they had good substance, he has used them as references in his Sahih Bukhari, but without the sanad. So he has left out the chain, but he has mentioned some of the narrations of Tamim ad-Dari. Okay, so that's about Tamim ad-Dari. Now coming on to the hadith, and I will just touch on some basic things about the hadith, and then we'll discuss it inshallah in detail. Maybe I'll break this up into 3 parts, and we'll cover it slowly like that. This hadith, again, it is one of the most important ahadith that you will study, and it is one of the 4 ahadith that are mentioned as being, you could say, like the pillars of, or being referred to as a, they said that these 4 ahadith, they make up the religion. So this is one of those 4, so it's a 4th of that. I think it was Abu Dawud. He stated that this is one of the ahadith around which all of fiqh revolves. And some of the scholars call this hadith 1/4 of the religion, but Imam Nawawi differed on that. What do you think his opinion was? So some of the scholars said this is 1/4 of the religion, and he refused to accept that. He said this is inaccurate. He said this is the entire religion. So it is a very, very important hadith. Does anybody remember? Because I have mentioned before what are the 4 hadiths, and you should know them. So one is innamal a'malu bin niyat. Nope. The 4 hadith which the scholars said they make up the religion. So one is innamal a'malu bin niyat.
About when he said Ma'ah?
No. When he had? No. Nobody remembers about the previous hadith we covered? Yes. The haram is clear, the halal is clear, between them is a grey matter. That's one of the main hadith. The 3rd one is the hadith about bid'ah, where Aisha radiallahu anha said that if anybody introduces anything into this matter of ours. And the 4th one is this one, ad-deenun nasiha. Remember it, I'll test you again next week, inshallah. Yeah, I'll wait for others to tell you. Anybody? Tell her.
about the bid'ah.
Mm-hmm.
And the halal is
Hmm.
the haram is clear, and
No, this one, ad-din. Oh, you already mentioned dinas. Yes, innamal a'malu binniyat. No. Okay. All right. So now, when it says ad-dinun nasiha, first of all, the word deen, it's weakly translated as religion. What do you understand by the word deen? What does deen mean to you?
religion.
Okay, it means religion, yeah. So it actually it means everything that you do. It comprises everything, not just because religion comprises everything you do, right? Your religion tells you how to sleep, how to eat, how to use the toilet. So yes, that is your way of life, and that's why they translate it as religion. But mostly people associate religion with salah and siyam and, like American separation of state and church. It's not that with Islam, right? We integrate everything. Everything comes from our religion. It tells us how to go to your wife, how to go to the toilet, how to sleep, how to eat, everything. Our religion tells us everything. How to run your country, how to run your finances. So, there's no aspect that we have not been told about. So deen basically is every aspect of your life, and the most important aspect of your life is nasiha. Now, this is a linguistic way of showing importance to something when you just use two words. So like the Prophet ﷺ said, Al-Hajju Arafah. He said Hajj is Arafah. Now does that mean that Hajj only comprises of Arafah? No, but it means that Arafah is one of the most important or big pillars of Hajj. Basically, if you miss Arafah, you don't get Hajj even if you did everything around it, right? So, or like for example, there's another one that he said an-nadamatu, I think he said an-nadamatu tawbah, that regret is repentance. Now, does that mean that when you repent, you only regret? No, you do a lot of other things, but one of the main components of repentance is regretting. If you don't even regret what you did, I don't think your repentance is going to be sincere, right? So, what do you understand by the word nasiha? Yes, so that's what most people think, and for many, many years I thought that that's what it is, and I always used to think, how can you advise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Because this hadith says that, they said, a nasiha to who? And the Prophet ﷺ said, nasiha to Allah, to His books, to His messengers, and you're thinking, how do you give advice to the books and to the messengers? So that is one of the meanings, but the word nasiha comes from the root word nasaha, and you say, for example, in Arabic, nasaha al-asal. So it actually means to purify something. It also means to bring something together. So that's why, for example, when you say tawbatan nasuha, tubu ilallahi tawbatan nasuha, it means that your sins broke apart your religion, and the tawbah, it brought it back together. So nasuha means to bring something back together, and that's why you're supposed to make tawbatan nasuha. So it's a tawbah that brings your broken religion back in one piece, because it broke because of your sin, so it comes back from your tawbah. So I will loosely translate it as sincerity, okay, because like I said, the nasaha means to purify, to it basically, even in terms of advice, let's say my mother-in-law is visiting me and she's planning to stay with me for a month, and she comes to me and she says, Fakhrunisa, I'm thinking shall I extend my stay by another month? What do you think? Now, am I going to say to her, actually, I think you should really go back because your daughters in the UK, they really need you? Is that sincere advice? Or should I say to her that, yeah, I think that that's a really good idea because, you know, you'll get some more time here, you'll get to rest, perhaps you can go to Makkah again. So you see, when I advise her, am I giving her sincere advice or am I giving her the advice that benefits me? Or am I giving her the advice, that just benefits her? Or am I giving her the advice that is really the best advice? And that's why when someone comes to you and asks for advice, it's not a small thing. It's actually a responsibility. Because if somebody comes to you and says, I'm really stuck about this, can you advise me? Shall I do this or that? Now you have to really make sure that you are 100% putting everything else aside and just genuinely, sincerely, purely giving the right advice. That's why it's called nasiha. It's not something that you just, think of your own interest, and you say, like let's say 3 friends say that we want to go out and eat somewhere. And they say, shall we eat at Cheesecake Factory or shall we eat at this restaurant in Ulayya? And you live right next door to Cheesecake Factory and you say, I think we should eat at Cheesecake Factory. Now, are you sincerely saying that because you think the food there is good and everybody will benefit from that? Or are you saying it because it just benefits you because you live nearby? So, what I'm trying to say is that giving advice is not a small thing, it's a big thing. And it has to be done sincerely. And it is something that you have to think about and make sure that you're not being selfish, you're not thinking about your interest or somebody else's interest, but it is actually the best thing to do, and that's why you're saying, I think we should do this. Okay? So,
you should comply with the... If it's
it should be what you think is the best thing to do, regardless of whether it benefits you or not.
No, I mean like haram, like it should comply with...
Yeah, of course. Of course it should comply with... it shouldn't be anything displeasing to Allah, but it should be, something that you feel this is the best thing to do, whether it makes me happy, upset, or it makes somebody else happy or upset, it doesn't matter, but I think that this is the right thing to do. Okay, another thing to keep in mind, I can't even read my own writing. Oh, okay. No. It's just my writing. No. I was making notes at the last minute, and my writing was going all over the place. So, if you can't take sincere advice or give sincere advice, then there is nothing in your religion for you. So, remember one thing. Before you gear yourself to give advice, you should be ready to take advice. Okay, you should be ready to hear criticism about yourself if you have to. You should be ready to take it before you give it. If you can't take advice, don't give it. If you can't listen, then don't speak. Okay? And if you are one of those people who can't take criticism, then there is a huge problem, because that means there is a problem with your level of sincerity. And this was the problem with all the leaders and people such as Qarun and Fir'aun. Why could they not accept the message? Because it was like criticism. It's basically criticizing their lifestyle. Why couldn't the Quraysh accept it? Because it was, at the end of the day, it was saying what you're doing is wrong, what we're doing is right. And they couldn't take that. So, there was a sheikh, and he was, towards the end of his life, he became blind. And he was actually ethnically from India, and that's where he used to live. And he used to speak very strongly against bid'ahs. So he was generally disliked amongst the people, because in that subcontinent people like to do all sorts of cultural things, and if you come and start speaking out against bid'ah and you say this is bid'ah, that's bid'ah, you're going to go down in their bad books. So towards the end he became blind, and there was one of his students, you could say, or somebody who used to help him. So what he used to do was, his name was Yahya, he would go to him, and he would he was a big alim, he was a big sheikh, this brother, his name was, I think, the Rashid or Rashid. And Yahya would go and he would collect his mail and he would read it out to him, because like I said, he had become sort of blind towards the end of his life. And he would read things out, and the sheikh, he would dictate responses, etc. So one day the sheikh said to Yahya, he said, Yahya, where is all the mail that we used to receive from, the love mail that we used to receive from our friends? He was being sarcastic. He meant, where's all the hate mail? Because what you've been reading to me recently doesn't have any of that, because he knew that he had been receiving a lot of hate mail. And so Yahya said to him, he said, Sheikh, I find it very difficult to read those things out to you. I mean, the man is blind, he's a sheikh, he's a noble person, and you're reading filth to him, that people are like cussing you and speaking down at you. So he said, I find it very difficult to read these things to you. And so he said to Yahya, he said read it sometimes, because he said there might be something in that from which I can benefit myself and improve myself. And this is really sincerity at another level, where you are so sincere to Allah, and you're so sincere about getting to the right place in the end, that you're ready to hear the worst thing. So sometimes, when people come and they are really angry with you, and they'll go, you are like this, and you are this, and you are that, and they start yelling. Just stay calm and hear what they have to say, because sometimes when you have calmed down and when the dust has settled, if you think about it, there might be something in those bitter words that actually apply to you, and that you can actually implement and make some changes. So there might be a lot of filth, but in between there might be one or two things which you can actually benefit from. So if somebody gives you advice, always take it. Never refuse advice, even if it might hurt your feelings, it might make you upset temporarily, but just think of it in the long term. That is what is going to benefit you, because it's better you get rid of your excess baggage here, then you turn up on the day of judgment in front of Allah with all your shortcomings and weaknesses, and you upset people, you hurt people, but you never knew, because you would get upset so quickly nobody told you. So be approachable, so that people can come to you, and people can tell you if there is something that they need to say. Okay. I'm going to stop here, inshallah, and I just want to tell you two definitions of nasiha, that in terms of advice, that some of the scholars said. They said nasiha means the absolute best answer you can give for the one who seeks the advice. And another thing they said is to call people to that which is best for them, and save people from that which is bad for them. So it is something that is sincerely and honestly said, just thinking of the situation at hand and what is the best thing to do, regardless of how it will affect you or her or him or anybody else. So you're not thinking of anyone's personal interests, but you're just thinking about how the situation should be dealt with. Okay, and of course there's etiquettes of advising. If you advise someone, you don't go and blurt it out in front of 6 other people. You do it privately, you do it politely, you do it in a certain way. So inshallah next time we will complete talking about nasiha, and we will talk about the 6 rights of a Muslim on another Muslim. So that's your homework. I will ask you next time, inshallah, and I will tell you why we're talking about the 6 rights of the Muslim on another Muslim. وسبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك.
I wanted to ask you in terms of what's our duty to advise, because I don't know.
Our duty to?
Advice and give.
Um,
Like Like recent, like, you know, it's if you say anything,
Record it,
you're
okay,
being
alhamdulillah.
judgmental. I don't know if you've seen any forums. If anybody dares advise anything,
Yeah.
it's always, oh, you shouldn't judge. You shouldn't judge. It's in their heart. It's in their heart.
Yeah.
So what advice would you give? And a lot of people are shy to advise, for example, close ones or this and that. If they see,
Yeah.
and then
But that's what I'm saying, that I think it boils down to the problem being with us. So for example, let's say you want to come and give me advice, and I think to myself, I'm the teacher, she's the student, you know, who does she think she is? She's going to come in. Now that means there's a problem with my sincerity.
but what's the onus on the person? Like say me.
If you're giving advice
If
and
I
somebody...
don't do it because I'm hesitant for whatever
Oh.
reason. I mean, is there a duty upon to give that advice?
I don't think there is a duty to encourage good and forbid evil, and if you can't do it, you know, it's in levels. If you can't do it with your hand, you do it with your mouth. If you can't do it with your mouth, you at least dislike it in your heart. So there are levels for that for a reason, because you might not always be in a position to do it. For example, there are things happening in the country, we don't like it, but is any of us going to get up and go and say, MBS, we'd like to have a meeting with you, and, you know, I want to just give you my feedback on what's happening. So what I'm saying is that it depends on the situation, and as far as...
I was just before the forum, and somebody was, I don't know if any of you watched the news, but there was this thing with Mo Salah.
Oh, okay.
Anyway, so there's big, people have done videos about it. I'm on the spokesman Mama's group, and people are like, you know, you can't, you know, you shouldn't do this publicly, you have to advise him privately, and there's this whole thing of, you know, it's, you know, don't judge. It's the whole don't judge brigade that you can't advise anybody these days because you shouldn't judge.
I mean, I think that if you were to advise someone in private, I don't know why they would... if
وآخر دعواهم أن الحمد لله رب العالمين.